Welcome to the Lucy in the Sky with Dinahs series, where Natasha discusses psychedelic-assisted therapy within high-demand religious context of sexual and religious trauma. Natasha is joined by Aimee Rossi and Aimee Heffernan. Note that neither Natasha or the Amies are doctors. They do not condone illegal behavior. Please make sure you know your local and state laws before using psychedelics. Go to learnreligiontherapy.com for upcoming CE information. Welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can also find all her core resources at natashahelfer.com. The information shared on this program is informational and should not be considered therapy. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality and may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
Welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast, Lucy in the Sky with Dinahs series, where I have both Aimee Heffernan and Aimee Rossi here to talk about psychedelics, sex, and religion. I mean, I don't think it can get more fun than that.
I can't think of anything more fun.
And we would love to hear your comments and questions, so feel free to share in the thread so we can either address them live or in future episodes. Most of our content will be question driven. Like, what are you wondering about psychedelics in the intersection of religion and sexuality, especially when we're talking about religious or sexual trauma? And especially for many who are going through some types of faith transitions or, just kind of shifting and being open to the potential benefits of psychedelics as part of either mental health treatment or lifestyle transition, which I think psychedelics can be really good for both. So anyway, welcome.
We're back.
Yeah, in case you're just watching us, this is our second episode. So go back and listen to our first episode where we explain a little bit more about who we are, why we're doing this project, why we call ourselves Lucy in the Sky with Dinahs, etc. Okay. Having said all of that, we had a few questions come up that we thought we would address tonight. And we're going to try to keep these to about an hour max. So whatever we can address in an hour is what we plan to do. And we hope to do this every 2 to 3 weeks, somewhere around there, as far as what you can expect from this series. So the first question that we got is, well, how do you know if psychedelics are right for you or not? So I think this is a good question. I think a lot of people, it's one thing to say, oh, I've heard this other person, in my life, maybe tell me the benefits. Maybe I've heard something in the news or I've read a little bit of research, and there's been quite a bit more, I think, mainstream attention being brought to psychedelics, I would say in the last 5 years for sure. So maybe people are saying, oh, that's cool, that's interesting, but what's it going to take for me to take that actual next step and be willing to try it? And I think a lot of people have a lot of fears or I don't know if misgivings is the right word, but just maybe nervousness. Is this going to cause me to have some type of problem that I wouldn't have anticipated? Is it going to be scary? Is it the right fit for what I'm dealing with? Maybe especially if I'm on certain medications or have certain diagnoses on board. I mean, the questions can be all over the place. So who wants to get us started with this one as far as initial thoughts?
Aimee or Aimee? We built it, Aimee. So do you want to take it or do you want me to go?
Go for it. I want to hear you.
Okay. All right. So I think I like to think of it from the context of like being really aligned for the experience, first off and foremost, right? Because I agree that a lot of people, especially people of our generation, and are trying this. It's like being talked about. Probably a lot more people have friends or family or people that they've seen like, wow, they had a psychedelic experience and like good things are happening. And so Michael Pollan's book, the Netflix series. Like there's just so much more in the media. There's a lot more studies being, MAPS is doing the MAPS thing. There's all of these things that people are talking about it more. Like you probably have friends doing ayahuasca. Like people are making jokes in pop culture around all of these, like these things, that this trend that's happening. So it's here. The psychedelic revolution is here. Okay. And I'm excited for it. And I like it. These are delicious questions to ask, to say, hey, when is this aligned for me? Is this a good fit for me? So
Yeah.
for me, I had seen all of this, and I was a therapist, and like I had clients that would come back and say, "Wow, I did ayahuasca, and it was a great experience," and I was like, "Yeah, whoa, this is cool." And then I was starting to see all the research and reading the things, and so it was like I felt called to it because I was seeing other people have positive experiences with it. So my mind was starting to be changed. And because of like my youthful days of cannabis psychedelics, I knew that like that was something that always like titillated me and interested me. So that is initially how I first got into it, feeling I felt aligned to it, right? So the thing is, number one, and first and foremost, is that with my own authority, I thought I want to do this, okay? So that's first and foremost. Then second, you got to consider, like, let's consider all the things. Like, let's not rush into this kind of experience. This is quite a nodal experience for people in their life when they decide to come to the experience of these sacred molecules and the sacred experience of these experiences. There's also fun times. You could do other kinds of things to it. But for the context of us, we're going to talk about it from a healing perspective. And so there are going to be things that you need to consider. Do you have psychosis in the history of your family story? Have you been on lithium? Like there's medical scientific things that are good to kind of research and know, to feel like, hey, is it medically safe for me and my psyche and my soul to be doing this experience? Because they are spiritual experiences too. Okay. So are you ready for big, powerful, intense, reverent experiences? Okay, so that would be, I think, a wonderful thing to consider with your therapist, with getting medical advice. None of us are medical professionals in the way of being healthcare doctors. And so consult a doctor that maybe you trust. Doctors, some have information on this, some don't. But it's worth considering all of the medications that you have and your specific thing to do the work it would take to say, am I a good candidate for these? And then maybe I haven't thought about this organically, but do I have a third thing? I don't know. But like those two first thing came to my mind is like, number one, does it feel aligned to you? Because I don't think anyone should be forced into these experiences. And number two, do some research on your specific context of life circumstances. And if this would be a good, positive, like open, expansive experience that you're in a space in your life that you could handle. What might come up from these really powerful, important, spiritual, therapeutic experiences.
Okay.
Aimee, take it from there.
I'm trying to decide,
Okay.
do I go into all the things I want to retort to, or do I
Okay.
want to hear from Aimee Rossi first?
Okay, what do you want,
I
Natasha?
want to hear from Aimee Rossi first.
Okay.
Like, what's your initial kind of answer to this question? And then we'll dive into all the intricacies.
Okay. So I love where Aimee Heff went, and I kind of went somewhere similar, except for my brain kind of divided into, like, I think there are physical things you need to, are these right for you physically? Kind of Aimee touched on some of those things, like what kind of medications are you on? Because different psychedelics, the way they work, have different contraindications. So like physically, are you in a place where you could handle something like this? What gets difficult is sometimes people come to these medicines and they're already on other medications to help with their mental health. So that's really, like Aimee said, it's something to talk to a doctor about, and they might have various opinions, but whoever you choose for your facilitator should have a lot of information about this for you. And then I also look at it through the lens of the emotional lens, right? Not just physical, now emotional. Okay. So of course, like Aimee mentioned, have you been called to this medicine? Have you been called to this work? Because it's no small feat. It's not like traditional talk therapy. It is different. So I always say, are you in an emotional space where you have the bandwidth, you have the space, the time and space to go into an expanded state, to really do some deep work and to come back and process it and be in a place where you're really considering things in a different way? Because how these medicines work is they will help you to see things from new perspectives, many of them. And so are you in a place to have your life kind of shaken up? And that kind of leads me into the third area, which is psychological health and wellness. Where are you psychologically? With my degree in psychology, I'm always looking at everything through the lens of the psyche. And so for me, it is, are you in a place where you can self-confront in an even deeper way than therapy? Like, I always recommend that before people jump right into psychedelics, that they do try talk therapy. They work in ways where, you know, they have someone who's pressuring them around their particular perspectives, so their viewpoints, or you know, how they see things. Because when you go in an expanded state, what you are doing is are literally opening up the unconscious psyche. And so because these medicines are non-specific amplifiers, they may amplify anything. You are literally working in the unknown. So you may come in with this particular intention, and psyche may have a different one for you. And so it can sometimes be wholly destabilizing, right? You may have an entire construct or framework about reality that kind of gets blown open, and then you're kind of in this wobbly space of, what does this all mean? I've seen that happen to people, and it can be super destabilizing, like I said, and you're kind of not sure how to exist. How do you do the laundry after you've seen, you know, met some sort of deity or something, you know? So I always say, like, physical, emotional, and then psychological, because really we have to be ready to work with that deep psyche in that way. And so that's kind of like, how do you know if they're right? Like, those are kind of my three areas, along with what Aimee said. Have you been called to them? Are you feeling open-hearted? Are you, you know, ready to do some of that shadow work and look at some of your blind spots? Like, that's deep work. That's not like no small feat, you know? So that's what I say.
Okay.
What about you?
Okay, so now I want to dive into all the things that came up for me as you were both talking. So the first thing that came up for me is we should probably have some disclosure on here.
Yeah.
we are not medical health professionals, not one of us. And even though some of us are mental health professionals, we are not your mental health professional.
Exactly.
Right? So we are not offering advice or therapy or anything along those lines. We are here to have interesting conversations, give you, you know, information that then, if you're listening and you're interested, we hope you take that to your own,
Exactly.
your own folks that would be trusted, you know, in your circles. And then right away and this all came up because you mentioned the word authority, Aimee.
Okay.
So you were like, you know, don't like really, what do I say? The suggestion is to really tune into self-authority. And right away, what comes up for me is, if we're specifically talking to mostly folks who listen to me, who are mostly people coming out of high demand religions, we don't have a lot of practice on this.
Sure don't.
And I think we go from a system that has told us how to live, how to be, how to make decisions, what decisions should actually be made.
There's a right way
Right,
to be happy. We must always choose the right. Like, we've been told that there's a right way to be human, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a whole nervous system. It's a whole way of being in a vibration of your whole embodied life experience. And so I agree with you. We have been told from an authority that this is how we should have a meaningful life and this is what we should do. So it's hard when you're out and you got wobbly legs to say, I don't know what I am or what I want or who I am or what are my values or all those things. So I get to your point to say, we are still learning that muscle of our underdeveloped authority inside of our souls. And so I agree with you.
Right. And so along with that, it's kind of like, well, who are the new authorities? You know, is it the people who write the books on the psychedelics? Is it people like us that are saying, hey, this might be really beneficial to you? Is it your friend who told you they had an incredible journey and you should do it too? Is it your spouse who's, you know, maybe pressuring you to do something that you're not so sure?
Yeah.
Right. So just kind of having a moment where we can all just check in and also figure out that we're probably not going to get this completely right.
Yeah.
We are all not, I mean, although I like these terms, self-authority and external authority, at the same time, we are human beings who are all influenced by other human beings. That we do not escape that.
Part of a system. We're part of a system.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Is there anything coming up for you, Aimee, Rossi, as far as authority?
Yeah, it is. I mean, one of the things that's so beautiful about these medicines is they can help you find your own inner authority. One way that this is so different than traditional talk therapy is you are going to come away with your own path, your own way forward, your own path for healing. Of course, therapists are filled with so much knowledge and insight, right? But sometimes you just need to go a little deeper and hear what a different part of you has to say, different than the ego. And so, yes, of course. And also, I would say, turn to the elders in the space. Turn to the elders in the psychedelic space who have been here not just a few months, years, doing their own work, working with these medicines. Ask them questions. Say, what's your opinion on this? Get lots of different kinds of sourcing and information and education. But definitely turn to the elders in the space is what I would say.
Well, which immediately, as you say, elders in the space, I think even outside of our modern Western world, like the indigenous elders who've been working with these medicines for centuries, right? And they do have a lot to say about these things if you go and look. So yeah, I like that. And we're not going to really focus on this too much today, but I think at the heart of what we're talking about is also where, because authority is so wobbly, our ability to grab onto authority correctly, this is where so many people, I think, are prone to the vulnerability of unethical, I don't know if clinicians, guides, whoever it is that may not be creating or curating a space that we would consider ethical. We'll talk about that more in a future topic, but I think this is why it's really important to at least consider the question. We may not get it completely right, but at least if you're considering the question about authority and where the interest is coming from, that's a good start to self-awareness.
Right. And so I want to also say something as we talk about authority and psychedelic experiences, because in that wobbly state of maybe a lack of inner knowing or a lack of having your own inner voice turned up because that authority voice has been so loud, I do think, at least for me personally, because I can only speak to my own self, is that psychedelic experiences did help that rewiring, and psilocybin specifically in terms of the brain rewiring that is part of the magic of the psilocybin, is that there were many rewirings that need to happen in my core sense of self, my core sense of belonging to who I am as a person and my own authority. And so these experiences actually helped me personally come back to the home of my own belonging and come back to my own authority. And starting with cannabis, like I've said, I'm like, the weed witch over here, but like starting with cannabis and that specific medicine, helping me turn out my inner voice and my intuition and getting more connected to my embodied lived experience. And then moving into then the rewiring that is the magic of the psilocybin and what that does in the brain and the science that way. And so I can speak from my own experience in the way of saying I had wobbly legs after coming out of good old ship Zion, like from the Mormon ship of like LDS, and coming out and being like, ooh, number one, I think I had a lot of secondary trauma from being a therapist in this work. And then I had my own personal trauma. And so I was really wobbly. I can admit that. I can say in a very vulnerable space in my life, I looked to, and it felt called to, the alignment that I wanted from these experiences. And I was really grateful for the rewiring that it did inside of me so that I could come back to the home of my own belonging. And so it is a beautiful, beautiful path to your own authority, even though there are many paths to finding your own inner authority. This is just one path that was really beautiful for me, So
I love that. And I think that goes into, and by the way, Steve, I see your question and we will get to it, just not immediately. So stay tuned, Steve.
Hey, Steve, we're here for you, Steve.
I see you.
We love live listeners. Thanks for the live listeners out there,
We love them. All right. So this kind of gets to the next question, which is, well, what can we expect from psychedelics? What is happening? But I think you're already speaking to that, Aimee, have in some ways, in the sense of like, and back to the first question, is this a good fit for me? Immediately I start thinking of, your brain on drugs, right? Like I was raised on the your brain on drugs era.
Egg cracking.
Right. The egg cracking, your brain's never going to be the same, which I think was really,
I was afraid.
that was pretty good advertising. I can still remember years later.
I can hear the egg cracking,
Exactly. So I think even me, and I'm glad, Aimee, that you're talking about personal experiences. We plan on sharing quite a bit of our own personal experiences. So this is more real and, grounded versus just academic or clinical. But for me, I remember both with cannabis, and I think, thank goodness, I was able to kind of counter this somewhat before my first psilocybin experience. But it almost felt to me like I'm allowing this foreign thing to come into my system, and it has so much power that it will give me information that I may not be able to trust. Right. So that was my initial understanding about how some of these things would affect me. And therefore I would go in like almost like the first few times I tried cannabis, I really went in almost like aggressively counter to the medicine. Like I was like, oh yeah, like what are you going to show me? Right. And if you show me something, I bet you I can't trust it. Right. And even as I was giggling, because you tend to giggle on cannabis, I was like, I don't even like the fact that I'm giggling because it's not really me. It's this other thing that's impacting me. Right. Instead of thinking, maybe what this medicine is doing is not so much like it's having an impact on me. It's allowing for aspects of me to come forward that don't normally come forward, right? So, Aimee, Rossi, take it away in what I'm talking about and what you want to say about that.
Yes. Okay. So, of course, I'm going in a lot of different directions, but the most present thing that's coming up for me is going back to this conversation about drugs, right? If you were raised in the 80s at all, you were programmed the drugs were bad. Right. And in reality, most of us take a drug every single morning. It's called caffeine, right? All the time. It alters
sugar
or sugar or anything, right? It alters literally our state. Caffeine is a drug, right? And so there is how these medicines work, but with psychedelics in particular, what they, to put on like this certain kind of like scientific hat for a moment, what they do is they literally quiet down the default mode network. There was a study done back in, I think it was 2006. And at the time they thought, psychedelics actually turned on parts of your brain. And what they found was actually it turns off parts of your brain, quiets down parts of your brain. And this is what I'll say. I don't know about you, but I needed some parts of my brain quieted down. And a lot of us need parts of our brain. Some of us need our brain just to quiet down, period, right? Not even just parts of it. And so psychedelics like cannabis is underrated psychedelic, but it actually can quiet down the brain. And like Aimee talks about this a lot, Aimee Heff, about how quieting down the brain in certain situations, like sexual situations, can be very helpful. Just such a good tool, right?
I do say that. Yeah, I do.
Right. And sometimes we need to use other medicines like psilocybin, that beautiful brain medicine, which can quiet down certain inner critics or neural pathways that are really deep and have been very grooved in our brain about certain ways we think or limiting beliefs and these kind of things. So like at root, what these medicines do is they literally actually quiet down a default mode network. And in that place, another part of our psyche can step forward. So when I put on my depth psychologist hat, what I want to say is how they work is these medicines are powerful aids in healing inner psychic splits. And I would say also outer psychic splits. Sometimes we get so cut off from our soul self, right? We live our lives. My name is Aimee and I go to work and then I eat and then I go to sleep and I do it all over again. And we're just like living our life from our ego, this part of us that is, yes, our egos are part of our psyches, but sometimes we lose this deeper part of ourselves. And I know a lot of ex-Mormons are almost like dying of thirst. Like maybe Mormonism didn't feed their soul in the way it would, or maybe it did for a time. But I see a lot of people who are hungering for like soul connection to soul self. And I personally think that's what these medicines are maybe here to do, is to help us heal the great psychic divide that we see it externally just in the collective. There's so much division, right? And you have these experiences, especially with certain medicines, that can help give you the perspective of the other, whatever we come into relationship with it, even if it's just for a short psychedelic trip, and all of a sudden we are pressured around our position. And that is incredible. Like, I'm continually in awe that Mother Earth gives us these medicines, literally grows them naturally, that help us with connection, literally empathy, to see things from different perspectives. The only way we are going to heal this outer division, personally, I think, is by starting with the inner division. And I think these medicines are powerful tools for that. Of course, there's other tools, right? There's breath work, there's therapy, there's all sorts of different things that we can do. But these are a really great tool to coming into relationship with parts of ourselves that we have pushed in the shadow, that we have rejected, that we don't want to see, we don't want to look at. I'm not that, that's not me. And instead we can come into relationship with them, and we can like start to befriend them. You got something kind of scary or frightening or other, or something comes up that you're just unfamiliar with. Just sitting with that can be a beautiful rewiring of a neural pathway, of us, I would say a psyche pathway, a soul pathway of like, can I befriend this thing that I want to like push away? And I see it over and over again, and I've experienced this in my life, and it has changed me. It's made me a better mother, a better partner, a better friend, a better human, right? And so I'll stop there. But for me, these medicines work. They work. So I think we are just at the tipping point of figuring out how these medicines work. We have
this is like
any research on them.
This is pioneer work for sure. Now, when we start talking in words that I'm not sure even I understand, much less the lay public, I'm going to say, okay, Aimee Rossi, Smarty Pants, PhD in depth psychology. What do you mean by intrapsychic and outer psychic splits?
Okay. Oh, my favorite topic. Okay. So from a depth psychological perspective, and I'll say this is just a perspective, it's not the perspective, but it is a perspective that has been really fulfilling for me in my life as I have gone down this pathway. When we talk about the psyche, it's important to know that sometimes we generally like clinical view is like psyche is inside of us. And as depth psychologists, we say psyche is inside of us, yes, but we are also inside of it. And that's a little kind of like a, what did you say, a Zen koan kind of thing. But it's just like the metaphor I love to use is dreams. When you have a dream, you are in the dream, right? You're kind of like the dream ego. Sometimes our dreams are watching the dreams, but mostly we're like an active participant in the dream, right? So we're inside the dream, but also we're laying on the bed asleep and the dream is inside of us. So it's like kind of holding that paradox. And one thing that depth psychology has taught me, or that I've realized maybe as I've gotten older in life, is that the truest things in life are paradoxical. They hold both things at the same time. And so we're talking about outer and inner. They are separate and yet deeply interconnected. They're different and the same. It's like dancing in that world of paradox. And so I might be kind of talking you in circles, but that's another classic depth psychologist thing, is we like to circumambulate things. We like to walk around them from all the different angles and look at things. We don't want to go right to the answer, because then is anything there in one answer for anything? Things are complicated and nuanced. So let's walk around it a little bit. Psyche is a complex thing, but if you are interested and oriented toward psyche, it will orient back to you. It is the great teacher. And so that was, did that answer the question?
No, that's lovely. And I think where I'd like you to go, Aimee Heff, is where I want to go.
Okay.
I love being the host of this.
Okay, yeah. I was just sitting here thinking, I love talking to these two smarties. I love hanging out with you two. What do you got for us, Natasha? What do you got for me?
Well, as Aimee Rossi was giving a lovely answer to, kind of like we've been taught to be distrustful of drugs, but in particular, some of these medicines that are very, like you're saying, they grow in nature. I just saw an article that jaguars are eating mushrooms, and purposefully having trips, because
the jaguars.
Hey, let's go for the jaguars. If you happen to have that as a mascot in your school, now you've got a whole nother,
exactly,
whole other level of things. Anyway, what I hear a lot, especially as a sex therapist, this is why I'm lobbing it to you, Aimee, Hef is people will tell me, well, I don't want to be dependent on cannabis, right? Or any altering thing. I should be able to do this by myself, which again is very Mormon, very American, very individualistic. Yeah. And what I'm trying to help people understand is what you see as yourself is batshit wonky doodle, because all of us ourselves are in a world full of anxiety, trauma, depression, things that we have been impacted by. None of us get to even know who we would truly be ourselves, because we've been impacted since the day we were born, and even before we were born, right? When we now know that there's so many things that impact us as a fetus. And so you don't get to say, oh, I'm not dependent. No, it's like we're dependent on a lot of chronic shit, quite frankly, to make sense of our lives. Take it away, Aimee Hef, if you even understand what I'm saying.
I would say that like that is the big like question of life, and how do we get into balance with ourselves, right? Like how do we get into balance with ourselves? How do we get in balance with other people? And how do we get in balance with the world, right? And so when we have been imprinted and conditioned to not have that like authority or like that creation of value system and all the things we've been talking about, right? I just think being dependent on something. I'm going to speak from personal experience then, okay? Because this is me. I'm like, oh, I'm going to bring a personal experience in. My relationship with cannabis has been a dance. You know, like it's been a dance that I've had to like, there have been many times where I think I'm too dependent on this. And I've had to then figure out, and then there's been times when I have too much Diet Coke. And I've had to be like, oh, I think maybe my body doesn't want so much Diet Coke. And then sometimes there's times when I'm like, I like sugar, and like maybe I need to like have and change my relationship with sugar. And then there's like friends that you're like, oh, this is I got to change my relationship with how I show up with this. Like we are constantly in relationship with things. So my relationship with cannabis and sex, I will then talk personally, because then I got to a point where I was like, I like sex better when I have cannabis. Like that was a true thing for me. And so then it was like, I started to then always be having cannabis with sex, and they were going together. And then this neural pathway in me that was my old Mormon script that was being like, is something wrong? Are you codependent on this? Are you now creating a dependent? Like all the questions that you asked me, I've been around and round and round in my little soul about this. Okay. Right. So, and what I've landed in my own soul is like, I have to do this with every relationship in my life, with everything. Maybe I'm scrolling a little too much. I had too many calories. Like I remember I used to get a subscription to Us Weekly, and I used to just like binge on like all the pop stars, give me all the celebrity gossip, and I'd finish it and I'd be like, oh, I don't feel good. Like that was me. I don't want to spend all my hours reading about like Angelina Jolie. I don't like, who cares? Like, and so it was like, then I had to say, I want a different dance with that. I want to dance different with that. And so this is what is all that wiring and all those conditioning and all those tapes and all the rules, all them rules, man. We had so many. And so having to then lean into a different wiring of my soul and surrender more to the unfolding of life, and be in awareness and questioning, like, Am I leaning too hard into cannabis? Am I leaning too hard into that? Psilocybin doesn't have addicting components to them. Ketamine has some hooks to them that they're kind of seeing. Like, not all substances are created equal. You're going to have to figure out alcohol. Like, I mean, people have been dancing with alcohol since it was legal. Like, so there's been like hey, maybe I'm drinking too much. Like, this is a thing that we have to do as humans when we have our own authority back, and we get to make our own rules, and we get to like live into the life that we want to live into. No matter what, you're going to have to do the dance with things that you introduce into your life.
Right. I mean, they're a tool, right? They're a tool like anything else. I always say the poison is in the dose, like anything else, right? And one of the things I want to add to this conversation, if it's okay, is that I actually think some of these medicines you don't necessarily need to be dependent on. Aimee and I were talking a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about how cannabis has this beautiful ability to kind of actually, we talk a lot about psilocybin rewiring the brain, but we were like, actually, cannabis has the capacity to rewire some of those somatic pathways, some of the nervous pathways, right? And as you move differently when you're on cannabis, your body feels a different sense of sensation, and those endocannabinoids are lighting up, and you learn how to be present in your body with the sensations in a different way. Does that mean then you always need that? What it actually means is you kind of rewire, and now you have built safety into, I can be in my body with sensations, right? And so I want to say you don't need to be dependent. It's like, do I need the tool? Like this morning, I didn't have any work. I took a little, I love actually microdosing cannabis. It's one of my favorite things to do. Little tiny 1 grammer, and went and did yoga. And every movement was just like, so in my feeling it. And I thought, I had this thought, I should move this slowly, this intentionally every time I'm in yoga. Rewiring that pathway. So I don't need it, but it's a tool to help me go deeper into whatever, like psychosomatic or the brain or wherever we are. So that's how I see it.
Yeah. Another personal experience I'll share. I feel like cannabis in particular helped me understand a potential I had of eroticism that I had never experienced without the cannabis.
I love to hear that.
Right. And I think,
say more.
And my guess is, and this is what makes me sad about my religious trauma, right, is that my guess is if I hadn't been interfered with so much, both through religious trauma and sexual trauma, maybe I would have had that capacity all along, right? But on my own, with my own capacities, with my own self, for whatever reason, that didn't even seem, I didn't even know that was possible. I already thought I was a pretty, what would I say, like intentional and embodied sexual being. If you would have asked me prior to me ever having had cannabis, I would have said, I'm really in touch with my sexuality. I love sex and I have a great time. Well, this took me to a whole nother level that I wouldn't have even known was possible.
Right. It's like you almost like you access a shadow aspect, something that you hadn't considered unknown.
An unknown, right? And in this case, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And to your point, Aimee, Rossi, I don't have to, although I do use cannabis often, I don't use it all the time when I have sex. I don't need it to know that now I have that potential because it was cannabis that helped me have that potential to begin with. Does that
make sense? This is what I say a lot. And I am snapping because this is what I've told lots of people. In Washington State, it is a recreational legal thing. So I could talk about it a lot with my clients to be able to say, hey, it is a great tool to go, oh, shush, that little Mormon boy shame particularly, or the Mormon girl shame, or the trans shame, or the queer shame, whatever shame that you got in there that's very loud when you try to get in a sexy energy with your own vibration. That cannabis, Mama Can, I call it, just like, and you don't need it every time, but those first few like really experiences where you can be embodied for the first time without all of the shame noise, which is huge for our people and our culture. So much shame noise in there. When that can hush a little bit and you can actually be in your bodied experience, you don't need it all the time because you're like, oh, I know that my body has potential to do that. So let's get back to knowing your body. Let's know your body. Ooh, you got a clitoris. You got a penis tip. Yay. Okay. So it's like getting back to like know your body and not feel like so shameful about it and think that you're the worst person because you have arousal and you are wanting to watch sexy things on a screen and get your sexy brain going and doing all the things. It's like nice to just have some of those shame stories. Just like be retired, like a little bit. So that's all. Yeah.
No, I love all of that. And for those of you who are only listening to us, you are missing out on all of our dance moves is all I'm going to say.
I mean, it's not a party on a podcast without some dancing.
All right. I'm going to I'm going to share a question that came in earlier. Steve Otteson asks us, Can you talk about guided versus unguided uses of psychedelics? I know someone who tried mushrooms, but they didn't have a guide and had a rough experience. But I've seen others have success with guides. Do you have thoughts on the differences?
Yeah, I think Aimee, Rossi.
Okay.
Mhm.
I mean, I definitely have thoughts. So I personally think, well, see, this is what's hard. There's so many different psychedelics, right? Do I think you need a guide when you're first starting out with cannabis? I don't know. Maybe you need a good friend who can kind of teach you the way, an elder in the space, somebody who's been using this medicine more than you have. You have I'm guessing you have a prescription. If you're in Utah, you've talked to, the people at dispensary, you've gotten some things under your belt. Maybe not, maybe, right? But if you're using something like psilocybin, I personally think, and you don't always have to use a guide, but I actually think it's an advanced practice to journey by yourself. Remember, you are dissolving your psyche. You have, first of all, you have to have a robust enough psyche to dissolve. And then when you dissolve it, you have to have a robust enough sense of self to go, wow, I'm not sober now. I'm not sober now. And can you hold that thought while also the thought of you're not, and like stay grounded? I would say it is more of an advanced skill. Now, I also want to add to this conversation that you don't have to. I know not everybody has access in that way, but start low. You don't need, I have so many people that come to me and they're like, I don't know if it's because they're paying for a facilitator or someone, they're like, I want to do 5 grams. And I'm like, that's a lot of psilocybin to do your first time. Like I always say, start low, go slow. These medicines are tricky and beautiful and sometimes devastating and sometimes destructive. And so you have to be in a place where you are really can hold that space of whatever's going to come up for yourself. Even now, with all this experience I have, I would much rather be sitting with a facilitator, somebody I trust, because I'll tell you, right? This is going to be no surprise to anyone here. I love to talk. And when I get on medicine, sometimes I get a little chatty. And so when these ideas and thoughts and feelings are coming up, it's harder to just talk to myself, right? I like to talk to someone and bounce some things off of them. And especially someone who's a great listener and a great question asker, right? And it's nice to have someone there who is not in an expanded state that can help ground you if something difficult does arise or something that is unexpected comes up, right? And then there's also this question of, you can use some of these medicines and not in a like, I'm gonna do some work. There's also like, you can use them experientially or recreationally. I mean, you're not supposed to, but you know what I'm saying? People do, they go different places and they do these things. And so there's a lot of ways to use these medicines. So there's a lot of ways to answer this question, but I would always say, err on the side of safety, err on the side of caution, set and setting, go low, go slow. These are all things that, feel important to me with this question.
Yeah, that's great. Aimee Heff, what's coming up for you?
Well, I think that there's different kinds of experiences, but if we're talking about the healing one, from my own experience, it is so nice to be witnessed. And I think that these experiences, to have someone tethered up into the upper world, and then you dip into your own unconscious deep ocean of soul, it is wonderful to have someone tethered up there to be able to not to just be a little lamppost for me as I go through the experience. For me, it's such a vulnerable, raw, emotional experience for me. So I've chosen to be very selective about who I choose to be in that space with, because it is sacred, vulnerable Aimee vibration space. And I care deeply about my soul space. And so being able to have somebody walk me through the experience was an unbelievable gift to me. And for particularly my secondary trauma and my own trauma, it was so nice to be witnessed. And just to have somebody there to kind of just be let's honor these tears that are coming out of your eyes, or let's honor this thing that was really important, that is part of your story that needs to just be made air and be released, and have somebody be there with me to just say, yeah, that was hard and I lived through that. And so that's why for me, having a guide there is really sacred. I don't expect them to absorb anything. I don't expect them to fix anything. I don't expect them to like do like, therapy, talk therapy kind of. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it ends up being a very sacred conversation. And so it's holy. And I think that we should take our soul space really seriously. And that is why I really appreciate the many, guides in medicine that I've had, and different people. I've had different kinds of experiences where I could see how different people do how they approach it different. And that's been really nice for me to be able to see different ways of how, people are in charge of that space. Just like a therapist, you got different vibes when you go into a therapist. Some therapists are, there's just different, flavors. And same with guides and facilitators. There's going to be different kinds of flavors of them. And I would just say that I've really been grateful for the guides that I've chosen and how that have supported me in my expanded state, and mostly that vulnerable state of like really grief and trauma of my own story, that I could just have somebody witness it with me. So, yeah. And Steve Addison, I know who you are. Thanks for watching, Steve.
Well, so I have a lot of thoughts here too, and maybe I'll forget half of them by the time I'm talking. The first thing that this kind of talks about kind of goes back to the first question, like, how do I even know that this would be a good fit for me? And I think a lot of people, even if they're not asking it in this particular language, is, what if I have a bad trip? What if I'm worried? What if I'm scared? And quite frankly, all of those worries were there for me, especially because I do have, some trauma in my background. Who doesn't? And I guess I was concerned that I would, go into dark spaces that, I've kind of compartmentalized in wise ways. I don't always have to be dealing with trauma. So I was worried that certain Pandora's boxes would be open, or I'd be worried that, you hear about people maybe having some paranoia or having some difficult thoughts to manage. And so you hear these kind of scary things. And it's like, well, is that going to happen to me? So I just want to share that's, I think, a valid concern. And my thoughts are, if in particular you are worried about that, then I think it's very helpful to have a guide, because even if you do go down what I would call a difficult process, not a negative one, because I do want to reframe that a little bit, that even things that are difficult to face in a psilocybin or a psychedelic space is still work you're doing, right? It doesn't always have to be pleasant for it to be very effective. And so, but if you are having struggle, there's somebody there to ground you, to remind you to breathe, to remind you that this experience will be over, to kind of be a reality check person for you, especially somebody who is trained and who is doing ethical work. Because when we talk about guides, I'm assuming they are ethical, trained people. And I would say, as I've done both, I've done my own journeys, and I've also sat with many people, especially with ketamine, because that's what we're able to use here in Utah. And a few times it has gone dark. And even I've been a little worried at first, especially when I was first starting to guide. I was like, oh no, am I going to be able to help this person have a positive experience, when they're having a struggle? And I would say, without fail, every time, now granted, I may have a time when this does not happen, but every time, even if it went what I would call maybe dark or profound or difficult, we have been able to bring it back to something grounded and meaningful about that experience for them. And in a sense, this is the beauty of trauma work under the influence of psychedelics, is that these scary, hard things that maybe we've lived through, now I call it the magic, right? The magic of ketamine or the magic of psilocybin. It's like a magic power. I can go back and revisit those memories in a space of empowerment, in a space of support, in a space of good questions, right? In a space where I can now rewire some of my experience with this, which is what is the magic of not just psychedelics. This is the magic of EMDR work, of ART work, right? It's this idea that parts of our brain, quite frankly, are brilliant. And parts of our brain, I say, are stupid, because they don't know that this memory you are conjuring up is not actually a real memory, but you are replacing maybe a past real traumatic memory with something new now. And this gives you a lot of power, and why it's so effective for trauma work in particular. So that's one thing I would say about guiding. Now I'm going to go into my own personal experience. So I've done both. It was very interesting that the first time I did a psychedelic journey, I did have guides there. And what I noticed in my little Mormon self that had to be deconstructed was that even though I wanted the guides there, the guides wanted to be there, the guides were supporting me for all these reasons, right? Because I was a little worried and what happens if they wanted to make sure I didn't have a bad trip and all that stuff. But what ended up happening, which I think is really healing for me, is that I noticed that now my psychedelic trip was being observed, and it made me feel like I had to perform. Isn't that interesting as a Mormon girl? Right? That would come up for me, that I can't, if people are observing me, I can't just be myself. I'm getting emotional, right? It's like I am worried that I will not do it right. I wasn't going to do my psychedelic trip right when people observe me. And so I recognize that. And I sat with that for probably a good 45 minutes while these people still observed me.
Very meta.
Right. And I was like, should I bring this up? Should I not? Like, I'm already in my trip, and I'm like, ding, 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 like having all these thoughts, which already now I can recognize was part of my brain doing the work, right? My brain was restructuring itself and noticing the self about me, about itself. So I actually, at some point I spoke up and I said, hey, this is what I'm noticing. I think I need to do this by myself. Right. And then, of course, they had a discussion. They weren't sure if they felt good about that or not, but that went back and forth a little bit. But they were still there. They were still physically in the setting, which was nice because I did feel like, okay, if something happens, I can text them or go to them. I knew what space of the environment they were in. But I really did go off by myself and had a beautiful experience. And I was really glad that this person said, if you can, try to write any thoughts you have. So I did. It's interesting for me to look at that writing now. It's like, I'm like, can I read my own writing? But I was able to really hone in on so many beautiful things. I always, in some ways, and I hope this isn't triggering because I like to reclaim language, but in some ways, it was like creating my own scripture, creating my own profound kind of insights that then I could go back and revisit. And why I love to not only write, or if I can, or have somebody write for me during these experiences, but I love as a guide to pretty much whatever they're saying to me, I am writing it down, right? Because I want them to have access to their own words, for the weeks and years and months to come. So those are my thoughts about guides. I think if you're looking for a healing experience, not a recreational one, it can be a good idea to have some type of support, whether like I did my first time, whether they were physically there, but then I ended up not necessarily wanting them to be present. And then I've had several more with people present, which was really beautiful, including the two of you sitting with me. So really beautiful things that I think, again, even thinking about the experience of three with the two of you facilitating for me, I know that I would have gone a different direction, which is fine. I would have gone a different direction. But because of the intentions I came in with and what we had talked about to begin with, the two of you were at times able to bring it back to a space that I was interested in to begin with, to explore, right? And I'm not sure I would have been able to do that as well. I would have gone other directions, which I would have trusted, but it was nice to have, oh yeah, I did want to ask myself that question, or, oh yeah, I did want to see how that might relate to what I've been dealing with recently. So that was, really helpful.
Yeah, good. It's beautiful.
Best time to be with you. I loved it. I loved witnessing that, and being, and in that experience is like, not speaking to your specific experience, but just being able to be witnessed by people while you go through that there's something to be said for that in our humanity, just human to human. Like, we're missing that connection. This is what I think in this like loneliness crisis that like we're facing is like our conscientiousness is going down and our neuroses is going up and the anxiety and like this meaning crisis that we're all in. It's like, I do think that the human connection is what's going to bring more meaning into our lives. And so I like that these experiences can be so much part of our humanity being witnessed for ourselves and with other people too. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that those are pretty much the questions that we have time for today. Is there anything that we want to say kind of as we like a wrap-up thought about, is this a good fit for me? How do they generally work, especially with trauma? And then also, like, should I, have a guide or not on board? So I think those are kind of the basic things we covered today.
yeah.
I would love to say something unless Aimee got something.
I was going to say a final thought, but go for your final thought and then.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing that's just coming up for me, so I'll say it here, is, I work with a lot of people with eating disorders because that's what I originally came to plant medicines and psychedelics for. And it is some of my favorite and most difficult work because it's close to home. But these medicines are really powerful for sometimes, especially with my like OCD clients or my clients who have eating disorders, sometimes they will just sit, and what the medicine is doing is showing them that they have the capacity to sit in discomfort, like just being in the discomfort of whatever is and knowing that they have the capacity to feel this discomfort, in part because they can't get out of it. Like once you're on the particular medicine and you have to kind of outwait it out, right? And so I have to say, like, this is something that's different than talk therapy in a way that the medicine will show you, oh, I can just sit here and be uncomfortable and I'm not going to die and I'm not going to implode. Like, I can sit here and just be uncomfortable with you and with the medicine and with myself. That is powerful. That is rewiring of the nervous system, of the felt sense of self, of your capacity. Like, we talk a lot about capacity. Does someone have the capacity to do difficult things, to be with discomfort? And I'm constantly in awe of how these medicines can help us see these other parts of ourselves and our own true capacity. So I just wanted to add that in too, because I felt like it needed to be said. And so, yeah, I think these medicines work in so many different ways, depending on what you're coming to and what you're bringing to it and where you are personally, specifically in the moment. And yeah, I'm glad we're having these conversations, I want to say too, because we're not necessarily experts on everything, but I think just having the conversation is important because it may trigger something in you or in a listener of like, oh, I have a question about this. What about this? And the idea is not always to get it right, is to say, let's just have the conversation. Let's have the conversation and be curious about what more do we need to learn? Even the three of us, what more do we need to learn about these medicines and the way they work? And so thanks for starting this series and having us on. It's my favorite topic. I love to talk with you too. It's just super fun. So those are my final thoughts.
I love it. Thank you, Aimee, Rossi. What about you, Aimee?
Yeah, my final thoughts is like, I think just to kind of add on some of the things we said in the last episode is that I deeply care about humans that have come out of high demand families and high demand religion. And with my years of doing marriage and family therapy and sex therapy, I saw the specific trauma that happens with the people that, like, I landed into this timeline with. Like, I landed into Salt Lake City, girl. Like, here I am, and so I had it. Like, I felt overwhelmed with the suffering of the story of some of the Mormon people around sexuality and around the sense of self. Like, I have like many tears I could cry, and I want to say that these are very spiritual experiences that happen. And I know a lot of people in my life think, what is Aimee up to? And there was one person that I will just say there was a rumor that me and Aimee Rossi do seances together. And like, that was a fun rumor. And I was like, hey man, like that's a fun rumor for my timeline. I guess maybe me and Aimee do seances. And so, but
you are a witch.
No, because I am a witch, but I guess what it is to like a lot of people that are confused by these, like not knowing why, and it's like I could talk for a long time, like as to why these are beautiful, powerful spiritual medicines for our specific people, because they are holy and sacred. And so we should be intentional. I love that we're having these conversations. I love that I don't claim to be an expert. I think I know what I like to know from my own personal lived experience, and I like to share that. And I like to say, hey, there might be some Mama Earth things that have been made on earth for us to do some healing and to wake up to a better, higher consciousness of self. And I think that these medicines do that beautifully. And I am here to just kind of have my own little testimony of how, for me personally, it's been really powerful for me to help rewire my own self and some of the wiring in there that kept me in a like a less favorite self energy. That's what I'm going to say. I don't want to be my highest or best self. I just want to try to live in a world that I can be my favorite self and create meaning. And these experiences have really created some meaning in my life that I feel so grateful for. So that's my testimony tonight. I'm this Dinah,
I love favorite self versus best self, you know, because anytime we use that language of best, there's like, what's the opposite? Worst?
No.
There's this kind of like moral overlay, which kind of goes into my last thoughts, which kind of like Aimee Rossi's, which is the more I get experience, the less comfortable I am saying I recommend anything, right? So even this question like, oh, do you recommend sitting with a guide or not? Like, it's like, well, here's some thoughts about that.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes people, because I think, again, leaving high demand religions, and I've talked about this with ENM quite a bit, it's like we want to figure out how to do it right. Right. And so if we're going to open up our marriage, if we're going to try psychedelics, if we're going to, leave our church community, it's like, we've got to figure out the right way to do it. And although there's great wisdom in parts of that, right? There is great wisdom in looking at, what should we expect? What do others have to say about this? What are some principles that might be helpful for us? Life usually isn't that neat and tidy. And sometimes people, either from a messy space, like they just dive in head first, even though maybe we wouldn't recommend it, but they learn valuable lessons from that, or they follow a totally different path that isn't necessarily recommended by the experts, and it ends up being quite beautiful for them. It's not a messy disaster. And so I just always want to check my own authority. We're back to authority. So we're doing full-time circle, that I'm not seen then as, oh, I have to do it the way Natasha says, or if I didn't do it the way this expert said to do it, I somehow did something wrong. I would prefer people to tune into the sense of mistakes and regret in a different way than we were taught in religion. Mistakes and regret were taught as catastrophic in our high demand religions. And I wish we could instead say, that wasn't very helpful. I'd rather not do that again. I learned this about myself, and I'm so glad I had the opportunity to learn that, because I'm not going to repeat that, right? And so that's a very different way of facing the many complexities of life without feeling like there's a one recommended path for all of us to follow, including opening up your potential willingness to experience the worlds of psychedelics.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Amen.
And so it is.
And so it is. And this has been lovely. So tune in, everybody, to Lucy in the Sky with Dinahs, episode 3, probably happening in a few weeks. We got to get on a more regular schedule so you can know when to expect us. And we also want to make sure that people know that we are going to be offering not only this podcast, but we're going to be offering some CEs for people who are interested, who are their therapists or guides or coaches or whoever is kind of in this world. We're going to start offering some CEs around this. And if you're interested in that, our first CE is free. So even if you're not a mental health professional or whatever, you can come and learn. And it's called psychedelic-assisted therapy within high-demand religious contexts of sexual and religious trauma. It's going to be a 1-hour CE on Friday, September 12th from noon to 1 p.m. Mountain Time. And if you're interested in that, go to my educational platform called learnreligiontherapy.com. And I'll put that in the threads, and you can start learning from us there as well. That will be more clinical. It'll be more, like we have to follow all the parameters for having a CE be considered legit. So we will do all those things. So it'll be a little bit more formal, but it should still be very informative. And anybody's welcome to join. You do not need to be a mental health practitioner to join us. So we'd love to have you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for the live listeners. Thanks.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Steve says thanks for the great chat. So there you go.
Hey, Steve, love you.
All right. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Natasha Helfer podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can also find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The information shared on this program is informational and should not be considered therapy. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality and may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
There is a place where time slows to nature's pace, and there is space there to find yourself in her embrace. Some places should be left alone. Now tishki say the so we can always go to the homeland of the heart. Years of our human history etched on her canyon walls, alongside Earth's mysteries. Some places should be left alone. So we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart. Deep in our cities, we sleep without her stars, yet still her presence sustains us from afar. Some places should be left alone. No tishki so we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland. heart.